All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our second Saturday seminar series. I'm Susan Jones, and here with me today are Gay Keene, Charles D. Ferdinando, and Charles Bauer at the Animas Museum. We've been busy preparing for the 2024 edition of History La Plata, which will be inserted in the May 24th edition of the Durango Herald. The theme this year is Front Lines to Home Front, La Plata County and World War II. Now, why did we pick World War II? Well, June 6th will be the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we didn't think we'd be around for the 100th anniversary. Since our award-winning look at World War I in La Plata County in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Great War in 2017 was so rewarding and enlightening, we wanted to take this opportunity in the 80th anniversary. And also, we found in our research that there are a lot of parallels between what was going on in the world leading up to World War II and what's going on today. Any opportunity to learn from history, we're going to grab it. So here we are. Well, while we were doing our research, we uncovered so many stories that one publication wasn't going to hold them all. So here we are today, looking at the front lines and telling the story of some of those who served. We're going to do this a little differently today. We got kind of a panel discussion going. We'll see how this works. And we do want to give a shout out to museum volunteer McGann Reed for doing a lot of the research that we're sharing today. Before we jump in real quick, some usual Zoom housekeeping. We're using Zoom's webinar feature, which means that you're all muted and your videos are all off. At the bottom of your screen, you may need to mouse down a bit. There's to see them, there are some icons. To minimize distractions today, we've disabled the chat function. But if you have an immediate issue or question, please click on the Q&A and we'll monitor that. At the end of the talk, we'll be open for questions, and you can either type them into the Q&A at any time and we'll answer them then or at the end, or you can click on the little hand and we'll allow you to unmute and ask your question. If you're in the classroom today, please hold your questions. And once we answer all the online questions, we'll go downstairs and answer anything in person. And we'll post those questions and answers in the show notes so nobody will miss anything. This session is being recorded and you will receive an email in 24 hours with a link to the recording and any other things that we come up with today. So with that, let's go. Now this image, which is actually catalog number 89159020, to me really illustrates our theme this year, Front Lines to Home Front. The sailor that you see here is Wally Millett, and he was one of the handful of La Plata County folks who served in both World War I and World War II in the Navy. He represents the front lines, but he's standing on Main Avenue in Durango in the 1100th block. This is kind of looking east, and that's the home front. The building at right with the flag in the window was at that time the office of the newspaper we know today as the Herald. The building at left was actually one of the many war production factories that were scattered around Durango during the war. This one was owned by a man named Jack Lee, and that's again the home front. And we're going to talk more about him and the home front issues when we focus on that in our next month's seminar. But to get back to Wally, Wallace Graham Millett was born in Kansas in 1898 to Rex and Rose Millett. Rex was a lawyer for the Denver and Rio Grande, and the family moved around a bit. They came to Durango, they left, they came back to Durango, and they were here when Wally graduated from Durango High School in 1916. The next year, when the First World War broke out, he joined the Navy and was sent to California. He served on the training ship Intrepid there. When the war was over, he came back to Durango, moved around Colorado a bit, married twice, the second time to Ann Wyman of Silverton, and he was involved in all kinds of things, the establishment of KIUP, our local radio station, the airport, and all doing that while selling real estate for Turner Securities. But right after Pearl Harbor, Wally re-enlisted in the Navy in January 1942. Unusually for someone of his age and experience, he was an enlisted man, and the Navy put him to work as a recruiter here in Durango. He kept a diary filled with newspaper clippings and photographs and typed up observations of his daily life. That diary is in the museum's collection today. He helped to plan a Navy rally at Smiley Junior High School in March 1942 that Governor Ralph Carr attended. He also helped set up the Avenge Pearl Harbor ceremony at the Kiva Theater on June 7th, 1942, and also helped with various bond drive parades while he was waiting for his orders to come through to join a ship. He was still here in March of 1943, but by that time he was having trouble meeting his recruitment quotas because, and I quote, "The draft is taking all men from 18 to 38 and leaving us the men from 17 to 18 and 38 to 50. The supply of 17-year-old boys is very limited now, although we hope and expect to pick up when school's out in the spring," which is kind of a chilling statement when we look back. But finally, in March of 1944, he was sent to Seattle and stationed aboard the destroyer, the USS Lutz. A brand new ship, the Lutz saw action in the Pacific, barely surviving a kamikaze hit. It limped back to port 1 year and 1 day after its shakedown cruise and was immediately slated for scrap. Wally returned to Durango real estate and helped even to build the Hillside Golf Course. He died in 1988.
This is a picture of Anthony Tony Ferdinando. This is a cousin of mine. Tony was born on January the 16th, 1922 to Oreste and Giovanna Frasca Ferdinando. He lived on the lower end of the Florida Mesa in what is sometimes referred to as Spaghetti Mesa because many of the early Italian immigrants took up homesteads on the lower Mesa. By 1935, he had graduated from the 8th grade at the Thompson School, which was the neighborhood school on the lower Florida Mesa. His family was unable to afford the daily commute to Durango for high school, so he never was able to attend high school before his military service. But 10 years after he graduated from the 8th grade, he received his GED. Anthony moved to Durango in 1940 and worked at Hawker Chevrolet as a mechanic. He married Trilby Wilson, but they eventually divorced. He married Irene Waddell on January the 15th, 1944, the same year that he was drafted into the military. He became a tail gunner on a B-24 bomber with the 8th Air Force, the 392nd Bomb Group, the 579th Squadron. He was a member of the De Palma crew known as the Crusaders. When not on a mission, he served as armor gunner repairing weapons. Between October 7th and 1944 and March 31st, 1945, he took part in 35 bombing missions over Germany and France, logging in over 229 flying hours before being honorably discharged at the rank of Staff Sergeant. He was awarded the Air Medal 6 times and the Bronze Star 3 times. Near the end of his flying career, he was actually shot down over Wessel, Germany, and was a prisoner of war for around 24 hours before he was liberated. Following his discharge, Anthony returned to Durango and worked as shop foreman for the Hawker Chevrolet Company. Then he partnered with Dwayne Castle in the Castle and Ferdinando auto repair business. Anthony earned his pilot's license after the war. He bought an airplane, which he performed all the maintenance on. He flew from the airport on what is now College Mesa, the old municipal airport. But due to an emergency with his plane, he made one of the first landings at the new airport, which is the current location of the airport in La Plata County. Anthony was employed by Fort Lewis College as foreman of their auto shop and taught automobile maintenance classes from 1966 until he retired in 1977. As a veteran, he was one of the early members of Durango VFW Post 431. And all of those early members actually helped build that facility, the VFW Hall here in Durango. He was involved in a lot of civic groups, and he was a member of an advisory group for the Bureau of Land Management, helping to secure land donations for the Perrins Peak Wildlife Area, and later around the old Bodo Ranch, which is now where Lake Nighthorse is located. He was a deputy on the sheriff's posse under 5 different sheriffs in La Plata County. He trained police officers and rangers in shooting. He also taught shooting at the VFW Junior Rifle Club and was a big game hunting guide. In the late 1980s, he took on the volunteer job of rebuilding the tower clock for the La Plata County Courthouse, and restored the clock and installed the 1891 Seth Thomas clock in the new building. Anthony was named Citizen of the Year at the Animas Valley Grange Award Dinner in April of 1989. He passed away on April the 7th, 2016 at the age of 94.
The Klatt brothers, seen here, both served in World War II. Ronald, who is pictured on the right, was the oldest son of Fred and Mary Klatt, and he was born in Sterling, Colorado on April 12th, 1918. The family relocated to Montrose, and then they moved to Durango in 1930. Ron played football and basketball and ran track, and then he graduated from high school in 1936. He then attended Fort Lewis College for 2 years and University of Colorado for 1 year. He worked at Durango Mercantile Company while he was waiting for his National Guard unit to be activated for World War II. He was sent to Camp Forest, Tennessee in 1941, where he was a sergeant in the 158th Field Artillery. He wrote home that this is a hell of a swell camp, except for the mud. The barracks we live in are just as good as the boys' dormitory at Fort Lewis College. It isn't fancy, but everything is arranged better. We go to school all day and will continue to do so until maneuvers start in June. After graduating from officer candidate school, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the field artillery and sent to the European theater. He was cited for bravery in 1944 for his actions along the Sarre River in northeast France. And then he was a participant in the ensuing invasion of Germany. He was promoted to captain. And in 1944, he married Margie Lou Husted of Durango. After the war, he worked in the auto parts business, and he joined American Legion Post 28 here in Durango and became a member of their Legionnaire Drum and Bugle Corps, later known as the Goldenaires. They were a prize-winning musical group, and they were a point of great pride for the community. And in our research, we have found they wouldn't have had much without these World War II veterans. They are well represented in the Goldenaires, and the Goldenaires are well represented in our collection as well. Even after he moved to Cortez in 1952, he still continued to come back to Durango for Goldenaires practices, concerts, and parades. The family then moved to Arizona, where he retired. And after his wife Margie died in 2003, he returned to Durango. Ron passed away at the age of 87 in 2006. Ron's younger brother, Fred William Klatt II, was born when the family lived in Montrose. He was born on March 3rd, 1920, and was in the 3rd grade when they moved to Durango. He graduated from Durango High School in 1938 and attended Fort Lewis College, where he was from 38 through 40. He was an associate editor of the Collegian newspaper, which might explain why he was such an excellent correspondent, reporting on his activities and doings while he was stationed in the South Pacific. His letters to his mother were quite often excerpted and published in the local paper. While he was at Fort Lewis, he lettered in basketball, and his letter was awarded to him by Coach C.W. McLean, who is also a World War II veteran. Fred enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1941, and he had never flown before until he began flight school. After graduation from the cadet program, he attended primary aviation training in Glendale, California, and then basic training in Ontario, California. After he graduated, he was sent to his first posting in the Philippines. His transport ship, the USS Holbrook, departed from Honolulu on December 5th, 1941. That date might ring a bell for you. It was 2 days before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. His orders were changed, and he and his cohort were sent to Australia. They were the first American troops to arrive in Brisbane. He was assigned to a transportation squadron, flying personnel, materiel, and supplies. In June of 1942, he was assigned to a bombing group nicknamed the Little Abner Squadron. Their airfield was nicknamed Dogpatch, and planes were named for the characters in the popular comic strip. So there was a Mammy and Pappy Yoakum plane, Daisy May, and there was even an aircraft named for the Dogpatch pig, Salome. He flew A-24 dive bombers and A-20 twin-engine attack aircraft. He flew 39 missions that were designed to put a stop to the Japanese island hopping strategy. He missed several missions while recovering from a bout of malaria that suffered no lasting effects. He was awarded several medals and commendations, including the Silver Star, for a low-level bombing and strafing mission in New Guinea. He took no credit for himself, attributing the award to luck. In a letter to his mother, he noted, "Miracles and funny things happen. On November 12th, I received a Silver Star. Hell, Mom, I didn't do anything outstanding. It was just a streak of luck." He was promoted to captain on February 23rd, 1943, and then flew his last mission in the South Pacific on May 2nd, 1943. Upon returning to the States in June, he married Margaret Ann Rutledge of Hesperus. He spent the remainder of his military career in Florida and North Carolina, teaching other pilots until he was discharged in 1945. Fred and Margaret returned to Durango, where he joined the Army Air Reserves as a major, and then partnered in the La Plata Flying Service, teaching veterans to fly. He estimated that he trained more than 75 pilots. Looking back on his career, he noted that he had flown 25 different types of aircraft and logged over 922 hours of flight time. He noted that many wartime pilots had more hours, but his were closer to the ground. Returning to ground operations, he became operations manager for Monarch Airlines, which later became Frontier, and he flew local charters until 1950. He was a Civil Air Patrol pilot and flew search and rescue missions, and served as airport manager for Monte Vista, Cortez, and Durango, and was also a member of the Airport Commission. He resigned from Frontier Airlines in 1963 and opened Clat Travel until his retirement in 1982. He died at his Cedar Hill, New Mexico home at the age of 92 on July 28, 2012, and was buried with military honors at Greenmount Cemetery. And the Clat brothers represent something that we found quite often in our research. We found so many cases of siblings and cousins who all served. So we can only imagine the anxiety of family members who had not one, but two or more of their children or their cousins in the service. It must have been a horrible time.
Helen Bateau was born February 22, 1920 in St. Paul, Minnesota. She graduated from Durango High School and attended Fort Lewis College, where she was active in sports and the newspaper, the FLC Collegian. In December of 1940, she entered nursing school in Denver. On March 30th, 1943, she married Hugh Cornelius in Raton, New Mexico. Hugh had graduated from Durango High School and attended Fort Lewis at the same time as Helen. Hugh had reported to the Naval Air Corps on February 12, 1942, and was selected for the Marine Flying Corps and assigned to a fleet in the South Pacific. In July of 1943, Helen completed her nursing training, and with Hugh in the service, she decided to enlist as well. Her first step in the process was to become an American Red Cross nurse in California. This was the entryway into military nursing. Helen was commissioned as a second lieutenant at Camp Callan, California, and in June of 1944, attended basic training at Camp White, Oregon, where she explained, "We got lots of immunizations, marched a lot, and learned to pitch a tent." She was assigned to the 224th General Hospital Unit with orders for overseas duties. She took a troop train across America to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. They say she learned to climb down ropes there, but in case they had to go down into the sea, abandoning ship, she always wondered if she really could make herself go into cold waters. The 224th Unit nurses crossed on the Queen Mary, which had been outfitted as a troop carrier. The nurses were 12 to a cabin, originally intended for 2 passengers, and the men slept on the decks. Reaching Firth of Clyde, Glasgow, Scotland, in December of 1944, she boarded a train headed for the coast of England so that they could go on to a hospital in France. However, in the middle of the trip, the nurses were evacuated so the train could carry troops as the Battle of the Bulge had just begun. The nurses were housed in a manor or castle near Bristol, England. Again, 12 nurses per room. Helen writes of this experience. "It was more hurry up and wait time, and everyone seemed to have a cold and/or diarrhea. We received a daily allotment of 9 squares of toilet tissue to meet our needs." Neuchâtel was the next stop, again with very rustic bathroom and washing facilities. Finally, the nurses were transported to a former French hospital near Évreux, France. The patients came for evacuation hospitals, most needing surgery or casts. On May 10th, 1945, at a grand parade, Helen was given Hugh's Distinguished Flying Cross by the commanding officer, Colonel Love. Hugh's plane had been shot down in the South Pacific. He had been captured and sent to a Japanese prisoner of war camp near Rabaul, East New Britain, Papua New Guinea. There he died from malaria and pneumonia on April 29th. 1944. The Évreux Hospital closed May 25th, 1945, and Helen was sent to Pacific Theater of Operations in the Philippines. She wrote of this trip, seeing the Rock of Gibraltar, and of her interest in passing through the Panama Canal, as she had childhood memories of her father telling about its construction. The war ended before Helen reached Manila. In Manila, she was at the 31st General Hospital, where she tells of taking atabrine to prevent malaria and slept under mosquito netting, which kept out the mosquitoes and the rats. Helen developed arthritis and spent time in Manila as a patient. She was eventually sent to the United States, first to Hawaii, then Fort Mason in California, then Fort Bruns in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and until she was finally sent to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio to be processed out of the Army July 21st, 1946. Helen did remarry and lived in California until her death in 2017. But she wrote of her time in the military. I was thankful for this experience, but I do not wish to do it again. There were times which were very difficult, busy, frustrating, boring, sad, and some glad. I met some of the nicest people I have ever known, and still hear from 4 nurses who were there with me. I do believe we helped some servicemen regain their health and return at last to their loved ones.
This is a picture taken down on Third Avenue in front of the Goodman home, and I'm going to speak a little bit about Merle Cornelius and Walter Bill Goodman. They're both in the picture there. Merle Cornelius is to the far right, and this was on the occasion of his marriage to Barbara Goodman. Merle Cornelius, Hugh's younger brother, was born to Temple and Olive Fraser Cornelius on December the 24th, 1922 in Aztec, New Mexico. The family moved to Durango, where he graduated from high school. He attended Fort Lewis College for 1 year and then completed officers training school. Merle worked in Denver for the engineering division of the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad while waiting for his call to duty. He reported to the Army Air Corps in February of 1942 and was commissioned on April the 15th, 1942. He attended basic training at Jefferson Barracks in Missouri, where he unfortunately got pneumonia, but he overcame that. Then in 1943, he was transferred to the State Teachers College at Eau Claire, Wisconsin for 5 months of pre-flight training. Merle married Barbara Gale Goodman, daughter of Ray and Edna Goodman of Durango, on April the 24th, 1944. He used to enjoy telling everyone that he spent his honeymoon in Europe and that it was a shame Barbara wasn't there with him. Merle was honorably discharged in 1945, and the couple returned to Durango, where Merle worked with his father-in-law at Goodman's paint contracting business. And he joined the United States Army Reserves and was very active in that in Durango here. Over the years, he served as a battalion commander and a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. Merle eventually took over the paint contracting business, changing the name to Cornelius Paint Company. In 1973, he was elected to the Durango City Council and served for 8 years, 2 of which he served as mayor. Barbara taught dancing and was involved in lots of social things. During the war, she was actually the social secretary for the Durango Democrat newspaper. Merle died on July the 30th, 2010. And now we'll talk a little bit about Walter Bill Goodman, who was Merle's brother-in-law and is also pictured in military uniform in this picture. Walter G. Bill Goodman was born to Raymond and Edna Ambold Goodman on November the 21st, 1910 in Durango. He began attending the citizens' military training camps at Fort Logan during the summers of 1926, 1927, 1928, and 1929. These camps were held 1 month each year at a military post throughout the United States between 1921 and 1940. They were designed to offer men military training without requiring them to sign up. However, if a man attended 4 years in a row, he would be granted the commission of a second lieutenant and could lead an organized reserve group. Walter graduated from Durango High School in 1928 and attended college in Hastings, Nebraska during the 1929-30 school year. Then he attended the University of Arizona at Tucson. Walter married Marguerite Zender in Durango on February the 2nd, 1936. He worked in the family business, Goodman's Paint Store, and was in the Army Reserves. By the end of 1941, Walter, a lieutenant in the United States Army, had been transferred from Fort Sam Houston, Texas, to Fort Benning, Georgia, awaiting immediate recall into the service. By August 1942, he was in the infantry at Camp Swift and had received a promotion from first lieutenant to lieutenant colonel. In June 1944 into 1945, Walter was with the 15th Replacement Depot in England and France. He returned home to Durango in late 1945 and continued in the United States Army Reserves. He was a member of the Reserve Officers Association as a major and became commander of the local reserve groups. In February 1946, Walter's father sold him the Goodman's paint store, making Walter the third generation of the family to run the business in Durango. Walter changed the name to Goodman Paint and Glass Company and remained active in the store until ill health forced him to retire. He died in Durango on September the 20th, 1985, at the age of 74.
If you have been in Durango very long, you have probably heard the name Shaw, because of our well-known jackpacker, Olga Shaw Little. But I'm going to tell you about a couple of her nephews. Ernest, pictured here on the left, was born November 5th, 1917, and raised in Animas City. He graduated from Durango High School at age 15. He worked a couple of years in the Conservation Corps, but came back to marry Pearl Kelly, August 20th, 1939. Pearl told me they went to Aztec, New Mexico to get married because she was only 15 and could not get married in Colorado. Ernie was working at Graydon's flour mill when he enlisted in the Army Air Corps on August 18th, 1943. Ernie was sent to several training bases, first as a pilot, and then due to a shortage of planes for training purposes, he trained as a gunner on B-17, B-26, and B-29 airplanes. His training lasted so long, the war ended before he saw duty overseas. Upon his return to Durango, he owned the Conoco service station at the corner of 11th and Main. Now you know why we have the 11th Street station at that location now. Ernie remained an active member of the community and passed in 2013. Ernie's brother Raymond Schaff was born April 24th, 1925, the youngest child of Alvin and Edith Schaff. Both brothers attended Animas City School, which of course now houses the Animas Museum. The color picture shows them in front of the school at one of the many Animas City School reunions that were held here for years. Ray also graduated from Durango High School. When he turned 18, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps on June 3rd, 1943. His basic training and aircraft and engine maintenance school were in Amarillo, Texas. Then he went to Kingman, Arizona, where he earned his wings as an aerial gunner and engineer on the B-17. His first practice flight was up the Grand Canyon under the walls of the canyon, which was the first orientation flight for every gunner sent to Kingman. After 15 months, he was sent to the 534th Bomb Squadron in the 381st Bomb Wing, 8th Air Force, flying combat over Germany. He served as a tech sergeant in the European Theater of Operations with the 8th Air Force, earning 4 battle stars. He was a World War II Air Force veteran with B-17 Bombardier. In his book, Time Flies, Memories of One of the Last Veterans of World War II, he cites Mission 221 on December 9th, 1944. Target, Stuttgart, marshalling yard. He continues, the 534th Bomb Squadron lost 2 aircraft, So 20 empty bunks were noted. We seldom saw anyone die. They just never came home. About 30 marshalling yards, and he defines a marshalling yard as a network of tracks and switches where railroad cars are sorted and made up into trains, and also airfields through France and Germany were good targets for the 8th Air Force, and we pounded these targets. We bombed almost daily, and if weather was so bad we couldn't find our target, we bombed targets of opportunity. Ray married Marjorie Horton of Durango, June 4th, 1945. After the war, Ray worked for a short time for the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, but he soon returned to the military and eventually rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. He retired from the Air Force in 1970 and moved to Texas to live. Raymond Shaw died December 17th, 2018.
Alma Lenore Stransky was born on January 25th, 1910 in Munden, Kansas to William and Emtha Stransky. The family moved to Durango in 1923. She was a member of the Girls Reserve, played for the Durango High School basketball team. She was a Girl Scout and a member of the Durango Camera Club, and she graduated from Durango High School. She attended Fort Lewis College during the 1928-1929 school year, and then she took education classes at what was then known as Colorado State College in Greeley. She was teaching at the Middle Sorte School by August of 1929, and then she served as the county superintendent of schools in 1930, but she resigned later that year to teach at Moss School in the Pine River Valley. Moss School had an enrollment of 20 students. By 1936, she was teaching at the Trimble School. She then began doing bookkeeping for various businesses in Durango, and in 1944, she enlisted in the Women's Marine Reserves and attended boot camp in San Diego. Also living in San Diego at the time was Mrs. Ella Berkheimer of Durango. This was the time when the Victory ship, the SS Durango Victory, pictured at left, was scheduled to be formally launched. Due to gas rationing, dignitaries and city officials from Durango were unable to make the trip, but they asked Mrs. Berkheimer if she would be willing to travel on her own dime to the shipyards at Richmond for the launching of the SS Durango Victory. And she took Alma with her. So Alma was there on December 16th, 1944, when SS Durango Victory was officially christened. Alma was then sent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for further training, and then she served in California and at Pearl Harbor. And she was a driver. It was said that she could drive anything on wheels, jeeps, buses, even 5-ton semi-trucks that were used to move troops, hospital equipment, and ammunition. She returned to Durango in late 1945 and resumed her career as a bookkeeper, working for San Juan Motor, Jackson Hardware, and other businesses. She was an active member of the Durango Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary and served as a district president. And she was a member of many public service clubs and organizations. In 1952, Alma became secretary and women's matron for the Durango Police Department. The Herald noted her ability to deal with tough female prisoners. At some point in this stage of her life, she entered a contest called the Best Year of Your Life Sweepstakes. She figured she had nothing to lose, and it turned out she won a substantial cash award along with other prizes. She retired in 1978 and was able to continue her interest in mining and eventually owned 7 mines in La Plata County. She died on July 11th, 1988 in Durango. Police Chief Wiggins praised her work with the police department and noted that she was always efficient and helpful to everyone.
This is the story of Carl H. Aspis. And this was put together for us by his daughter, Helen Ruth Aspis. In early spring of 1942, Carl Aspis, a longtime resident of La Plata County, was deemed qualified by the La Plata County Selective Service Board to serve in the U.S. Army. A first step on a nearly 4-year march that would take him to boot camps in Fort Sutton, South Carolina, Fort Beauregard, Louisiana, and as a private in the 301st Ordnance Regiment, 3rd Battalion, to the deserts of North Africa, the rocky coast of Sicily, and the vicious combat zones of Italy's Long Boot. Because the European allies considered the American troops to be insufficiently battle-hardened for service in the early battles of continental Europe, the 3rd Battalion was shipped to North Africa with the expectation that once Rommel's forces in Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt were defeated, the 3rd Battalion could then advance to Southern Europe via the stepping stone of Sicily. While heavily censored, Carl's more than 250 letters home to his mother in southwest La Plata County helped a reader to piece together his wartime experiences from 1942 to 1945. Allie Aspis kept the Aspis Ranch going while 3 of her children served in the war. Her oldest son, Ward, was serving in the Pacific Theater as a Seabee. Her middle daughter, Helen, was a U.S. Army Corps nurse serving in England and Belgium, and Carl was fighting in North Africa and Southern Europe. While Carl apologized for not writing more often by stating he had been moving about, the reader knows that he was engaged in terrific fighting, some of the war's worst at Naples, Anzio Beach, and the final liberation of Rome. A booklet published by the Fifth Army describes the battles encountered by the Army on the road to Rome. One photograph shows Carl struggling with the help of foot soldiers to get a Jeep through the mud somewhere on the winter line in Italy, and you'll see that picture on the screen. Usually his letters asked about the ranch and his mother's health. Some letters had interesting bits of news. The plenitude of ripe tomatoes in season, how after months of wet feet, the battles in Italy were almost always in knee-deep mud. His feet were finally dry. The wonderful blessing of a good roast beef dinner, not rations, and how his victory was assured. He, a private first class, was assigned the job of bartending for an officer's celebration. He mentioned pals he made along the way, but these were ephemeral. He described the halcyon days after the Allies reclaimed Rome from Germany and the beautiful countryside of the northern Italian Alps, which reminded him of the La Plata Mountains. Perhaps these bright glimpses were described to keep his family from worrying. In late October 1945, Carl returned to the U.S. via what he always called a rickety troop carrier, the USS Moses Cleveland. He married, started a family, and took up ranching again. He attended classes at Fort Lewis College under the GI Bill, and he completed ranch work using his Army surplus Jeep that had served in Guadalcanal. The Jeep is still safely stored by his daughter Helen Ruth at the historic Aspis Ranch. Like most heroes of World War II, Carl never spoke about the atrocities and pain of war. He did recall fondly the Arab people of North Africa, the hospitality of the Italian people toward the U.S. soldiers, and the beauty of Italy's northern Alps. We know the war experiences started his love affair with Jeeps.
And this is the last story that we have to share today, but there's so many more. And hopefully this will inspire you to find some stories in your family. The woman in this photograph that you see is Hallie Thomas. We found this picture in the diary that Wally Millett kept during the war when he was talking about all his recruitment efforts in Durango. We were really curious to who she was and why she was here, and so we checked it out. Hallie Sylvie Thomas was born in 1909 in the western part of the county around the Klein-Hesperus Marble area. She attended high school at Fort Lewis, and after she graduated, she went to California, where she worked her way through a 4-year program at the Pasadena Hospital School of Nursing. She graduated in 1930. She stayed and worked in California for several years, but at one point she came to visit her mother here in Durango and talks about how she drove from California in a brand new Chevrolet Sport Roadster, making the trip in 2.5 days. The weather in Durango was a relief, as she noted. The temperatures in Flagstaff were 118 degrees. When the war broke out, Hallie returned to Durango and enlisted as a nurse in the Army. But she didn't get called up right away. So here in Durango, she went to work as a cook at Jay's Sandwich Shop. And that's where we see this picture. She's standing in front of that adorable building. It actually used to be on Main Avenue, just north of Ernie's Conoco Station at 11th and Main. It was known as Jay's first, and then later it was known as Irene's Sandwich Shop. Hallie, again, was a cook and waiting for her orders to go through. And Wally Millette talked about when he took this picture, he and his buddies were teaching her how to salute. So she'd be ready for that when she got called up. Hallie got her orders in December 1942 and was stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. In July 1944, she was promoted to first lieutenant. She never went overseas, but just served here in the U.S. She returned to Durango after the war, never married, but lived in Durango taking care of her mother for many years. For a while, they lived on East 5th Avenue and then on East 3rd. She died in 1984 and is buried in the Marble Cemetery.
And that brings us to a conclusion of our stories today. But as usual, we do have a pitch and a homework assignment for everyone. As you're probably aware, our nation is losing World War II veterans at an extremely fast rate. There are very few left. So if you have a World War II veteran in your family, please, please, please get their stories. Even the youngest veterans are now in their mid to upper 90s. Failing that, the baby boomers, the first generation of these veterans, if you have access to those letters, if you are or know a baby boomer, please, please, please get those stories written down. We cannot forget the greatest generation.
Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any coming in online. And again, we'll go downstairs and check with the live audience and share whatever comes up. I'm watching for online questions. We'll do the shameless self-promotion. You know, summer's coming and visitation at the museum is certainly picking up. We're busy right now with school visits as the school year comes to a close, and History of La Plata. Watch for that in the weekend edition of the Durango Herald on May 24th. We'll post it on our website hopefully that day, and hopefully also we'll have additional hard copies here at the museum that weekend. Next month, our second Saturday seminar series webinar will concentrate on the home front in La Plata County during the war. It'll be on Saturday, June 8th at 1 p.m. As of now, it's going to be Zoom only, just kind of like this, and you can sign up on our website to get the Zoom presentation. It will be recorded, or you can watch on the big screen in the classroom. The 8th will also be the grand opening of our new exhibit on World War II in La Plata County in the main gallery. And I bet there'll be donuts, so mark your calendars and come on over June 8th. One more check for questions. I don't see any. To end it up, keep up with us, join us, visit our website. We have lots of resources up there, including all of the recorded webinars. Subscribe to our e-blasts, follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram. And if you want to see continued programming like this, be sure to hit the donate button on the bottom of our website. We appreciate your support, and thanks everyone for joining with us today.
Thank you.